Hey, how's it going, everyone? It's good to see you here, although technically I'm not seeing you. It's good for you to see me, I guess. Today we are going to be looking at the next step in the evolution of the modern Western world, and that step is the Renaissance. The Renaissance is perhaps one of the most important periods in modern Western development, and it's going to really be a game changer for everything. Now, in the 19th century, a Swiss historian by the name of Jacob Burckhardt gave the period between 1378 and 1525 the name Renaissance. Burckhardt's writings detailed what he believed to be the start of a period that would destroy the human race. Ideas of atheism and individualism came at the expense of the church, and these ideas would lead to the ideas that were so prevalent in his world, such as liberalism and democracy, which he really believed was leading to the chaos of his period and the eventual demise of humanity. Now, Burckhardt may have seen this period as a bad thing for the human race, but most historians now view it as another step in the natural progression of where we started from uh, in the ancient world. Now, the age we know of as the Renaissance has its beginnings in the 14th century, and it's going to be a movement that was uh, developed among the educated, mostly upper class men of northern Italian cities. These are the very same cities we looked at in the Age of Discovery. These are the merchant cities. These are the cities where people were not so much uh, reliant upon labor for survival. And once these people had money, they were able to spend their time getting educated. So they began to turn to the writers of the ancient world, people like Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, and they rediscovered these ideas. Now, the most influential of the men who brought these ideas forward was a writer by the name of Petrarch, who attempted to emulate as closely as possible the literary figures of ancient Rome. Um, and the more he read, the more he became fascinated not only by the literature of that period, but the architecture of the period as well. And, he actually destroyed his modern villa and rebuilt his home to look like that of one of ancient Rome. He went even so far that he started to wear the clothing of ancient Rome, and you would often see him wearing the tunics or the togas that were worn at that time. So his obsession eventually led him to reject the period between where he was living and that of ancient Rome. And he was the one who kind of coined this phrase that these were the Dark Ages, or at best a Middle Age. It was a valley between the peaks of history. And he saw that he was living in a period of rebirth, a renaissance, or the awakening of a new age. Now, Petrarch knew that to capture the glory that was Rome, that the writers and artists of that time said, he had to study those innovations and he had to open that up for others to study as well. So he created a course of study. Kind of think of it like today we have people who are experts running a master class. He created the master class called Studata Humanitas. These were very liberal studies, and it contained a philosophy within it known as humanism. Now, humanism, it's not rigorous. It's not all encompassing. It's not a belief system, but it's an attitude. It's an attitude towards learning and towards life. Humanism focused on the individual, which was a huge shift from what we saw in medieval society, which was really focused on the community. Think about it. Medieval society didn't want individuals. Groups were needed to survive. So each person, from the ruler to the peasant, had an important part to play. And this is why we have the strictness of that feudal system. So, even within art during the Renaissance, the Middle Ages, there was really no individual kind of present. Like we do know of painters of the time, but most artists didn't see the need to sign their work. To them, the idea of them signing the work, which was inspired by God, was kind of like the idea of a baker signing each loaf of bread they created. And, you know, everything contributed to the well being of everybody else. And Christianity also encouraged the sense of community. Although people participated in the sacraments as individuals, they were really kind of encouraged to live and think as a group. Now, I don't want you to think that groups weren't important to Renaissance society either and the development of individuals. People saw groups as being important, but they were springboards to a far greater individual achievement that you could really obtain through your talent and, most importantly, hard work. People really started to prize their sense of uniqueness and individuality. Just to kind of give you an example, the rich began to hire artists. They wanted them to paint their portraits or to sculpt their likeness. This was something that was unheard of in the Middle Ages because, those artist talents were needed to do the same things, to sculpt the images of, Jesus and Mary and the disciples, or to paint their pictures. So, the fact that the rich are now like, we want to be immortalized with an artwork was a huge thing. The other thing we start to see is that the rich are hiring writers who they're getting them to write the autobiographies of these people. Even artists themselves started to do self-portraits. If you've got this talent, why not share it with the world? Share your image with the world. And artists started to see that there was a lot of money to be made in promoting their work. And it's during this time where we start to see the artists signing their work. You think about it, your friend comes over and they see that great work of art, that image of you, and they're like, wow, I really want a picture of me as well. Who painted that? And you can be like, oh, it was Michelangelo, Leonardo, whoever. So self-confidence and individualism, which were once considered to be medieval sins, became things that were prized virtues. In the minds of many Renaissance writers, every man should exhibit the quality of virtue. Now, this is spelled Virtu. It doesn't mean virtue in the sense that we think of it today, but it's rather the ability to make an impact on whatever one chooses to do. The trait of virtue should be most important in rulers. For a ruler, virtue meant the ability to shape society, to leave your mark on history. You were encouraged, if you were a ruler, to emulate the great rulers of the past, such as Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great. You need to work to be like them. Matter of fact, you needed to work to be better than them. So the notion of individualism includes the belief that people and objects of this world, they're all important, or at least they're important enough to warrant a picture or a verbal description. And this belief is also called secularism. Now, the modern meaning of the word implies that there's the denial of the existence of God. However, no one during the Renaissance denied God's existence or the importance of religion in a person's life. What they did reject was the idea that it was necessary to reject the material world in order to worship God. They felt that it was up to us as individuals to develop the talents God gave us and to create the works worthy of God. And this was the greatest way in which we could worship, not squandering our talents or our abilities, but fostering them, praising God by giving everything you can to be the best you can be with those talents. So, if you were given the talent to play the piano, your goal was to be the greatest piano player of all time. Now, will you achieve that? Maybe, maybe not. But it's the journey of trying to get there. It's using your abilities to the best that you can. And just imagine how great this world would be if we all really started to work towards fostering what makes us unique, what makes us talented, what makes us great. Think about how much better this world could be. So, the basis of all of these features that I've been talking about was humanism, and its core, like I said before, was learning. All the humanists agreed in the importance of education, not just for the individual, but also for society as a whole. Now, education hadn't really been something that was important in the Middle Ages. Medieval education was primarily done by the church, it was their responsibility, and it was usually geared towards their needs. Church schools trained students to read and write so they could copy the manuscripts. They could serve as church lawyers. They could write letters on behalf of the church. They would also be able to read the Bible to others to promote faith. So it's not surprising that education was kind of put to the side once you removed the faith aspect of it. People were geared towards surviving. So if you were in the working classes, if you were one of the peasants of the Middle Ages, you didn't really see a need for children to be educated. You didn't really see a need for yourself to be educated beyond the skills that would ensure your success in farming or your survival for whatever was needed for your community. So education really kind of came to was pushed off to the side. This was something that is really going to change. Um, you know, the humanists believed that the ultimate aim of human life was to act. And this meant that education was kind of an outward experience. It emphasized practical skills such as public speaking and writing. It would also foster a new generation of politicians, diplomats, and military leaders. In the Middle Ages, education was done in a monastery, so where only God could see it. But in the Renaissance, it moved to the cities and towns where everybody could see it. Everybody could take place of it. Everybody was part of it. It really becomes a key part of everyday life. It's accessible. To be the best you can be, you have to learn all that you can. And, education was prized. Education was revered. Education was something that people wanted to do. And imagine if our world today put that emphasis on using education to be the best person that you could be, to learn all you can about everything so you can learn more about yourselves. Think about how different this world could be for us all.